Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto became the second coming of the Yellow Flash with Hinata Hyuga, Sakura Haruno, Ino Yamanaka, Tenten, Tamari, Tsunade Senju, Anko Midarashi and Kurenai Yuhi. Part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. I will not go easy on you just because you are on my team, Neji stated. Tenten smirked, readying some kunai. Because they'd be fighting each other in the finals, they had been training separately, Neji with his clan, Tenten with assorted weapon users and Genma. Neji didn't know she had finally completed the Hiroshin, and neither did he know about the other tag, the one that swapped him with one of her weapons. She'd have to get in close to apply it, but then he wouldn't be able to get it off. Her and Genma had worked on applying seals at a touch, and she'd finally managed it with the Kawarmi seal. Someday, she hoped to be able to do it with her Hiroshin seal, so she didn't have to prepare weapons beforehand, and could place down seals quickly on her own. Begin, Anko shouted, shining up to her spot. Genma couldn't proctor because he was busy teaching Tenten, so they let Anko come back for the third round. Tenten started launching weapons at Neji, every single one deflected by what she realized was the Kaden. Genma had managed to get one of his Hyuga friends to come in and spar with her a few times, so she recognized the move. She just needed a few more kunai marked with her seal on the ground so she could Hiroshin to one, get inside his Kaden bubble long enough to tag him with her Kawarmi seal, then Hiroshin out before she got hurt. That was the last one not in her seals, so it was time. She picked the one closest to him, and he stopped his Kaden, panting slightly as he watched her carefully. With a flicker of chakra, she Hiroshined to the kunai closest to him, tapped him to apply the seal, and Hiroshined out of the way before he could do the Kaden again and throw her against the wall of the stadium. Neji inspected the spot she had tagged him suspiciously, but found nothing. The seal was not visible to the eye when chakra wasn't being channeled through it. Not like he could remove it anyway. Tenten grinned, activating the seal and swapping Neji with one of her weapons. He staggered, slightly off balance, and she took the opportunity to Hiroshin in, tie him up, and put a kunai to his throat. Forfeit or I knock you out. Neji glared very heavily, but conceded. I forfeit. Winner, Tenten. Anko chirped happily, shining into the arena and high-fiving Tenten. Tenten grinned, attaching chakra strings to all of her weapons and dragging them towards her. She sealed them up haphazardly, planning to sort and check over them later. Genma high-fived her when she got back up to the stands. Great job. Taking down a Hyuga is no small feat. Tenten nodded, taking a deep breath. Maybe our spars will actually be even now. You never know, Genma said, clapping her on the back. Hey, Genma-sensei, Tenten, do you think I'll make Chunin? Genma turned away from watching the second match, Shino Aburame and Shikamaru Nara. Sure, I may not be one of those on the proctor roster because of mentoring you during the third round waiting time, but I saw your scores for the first two. They were pretty good. With your display here, I'd say that yes, you're pretty likely to make Chunin. If you continue showing a healthy measure of strategy in the following rounds, you should be on the fast track for Chunin. What are they looking for? Tenten asked. Well, usually in the first test they're looking for subtlety, and a little bit of leadership. In this case, you showed minor leadership in taking control of how your teammates were able to cheat with your mirrors. The second test is about leadership again, and some power and strategy. Third test is all about power and strategy. The traits of a Chunin, Genma explained. Down there, I wouldn't be surprised if both boys made Chunin. Both are showing adequate levels of power and good strategy. Aburame and Nara clans aren't known for brashness, Tenten agreed. That's one way of putting it, Genma said, nodding. There we go, Nara won, then forfeited. Standard Nara when not in life or death. Remember that, Nara are primarily diversions. They trip up people, prevent them from going after the main party. They don't like effort, but if you hurt one of their own, that is a fear that will permeate your whole being. It's a kind of fear that few people feel. Tenten nodded along, watching the two walk out, leaning against each other somewhat. They both got in some good blows. Yep, Genma said, grinning around the Senbon in his mouth. This next one should be interesting. With the Sasuke and Gaara match put off, Naruto vs Asuna puppeteer should be an adventure. Or not, Tenten noted a moment later when Kankuro forfeited in advance. Genma frowned. Stay here, I'll be right back. Tenten nodded, watching him Hiraishin to the third Hokage's side curiously. He whispered with the cage for a while, then Hirai shined back. Alright, listen up, I'll explain this once. Tenten immediately turned her full attention on Genma. The Hokage suspects something will happen in this match, something big. It's possible this will become a battleground. If that happens, start Hirai shining as many civvies out and into the bunkers as fast as you can. Genma glanced around nervously. Once everyone's in the bunkers, stage 2 of Konoha's plan will begin. Everyone will let loose. Heads will be rolling everywhere. You will probably have to kill some people if this suspicion is correct. Do you understand? Tenten nodded quickly. Hi. Now, find me as soon as you can after the second stage has been announced via the red-tailed hawk circling twice over the stadium. If you don't spot that, the giant form of Shuza-sensei should cue you in. Once the second stage has begun, pull out your full arsenal to protect and kill. Keep an eye on your fellow genin. I would suggest keeping a Hiraishin seal on all of them if you can. Tenten nodded again, and Genma suddenly smiled. Now, let's enjoy the match, shall we? Tenten took that as an indication to pretend nothing was wrong, and turned to look at the match. Oh no, Genma said, leaning forward. Kakashi taught him that. What? Tenten asked, examining Sasuke closely. He was on the wall, and finished going through hand signs. Chidori, Genma said solemnly. Kakashi's own jutsu, an A-ranked assassination jutsu. Why is he using it? Tenten asked, horrified. This is a simple match. Not life or death. He probably didn't stop to think about what else could break that shield of Gaara's, Genma said, glaring daggers at Kakashi. Couldn't he just, I dunno, slow the sand down with some water and then use his speed to get in close? Tenten asked, wincing at the scream that rang out around the arena. It's happening, Genma hissed. Be wary, and watch out for genjutsu. Tenten nodded, watching the stadium nervously. White feathers started floating down from the sky, and Tenten, on guard for a genjutsu, immediately broke it. Tenten, go, get civilians out of here. Genma shouted, beginning to throw Senbon at the incoming Suna shinobi. Tenten nodded, running over to a set of civilians and, leaving a kunai impaled under the seat, she grabbed the shoulders of two, her eye shining to a seal she had placed inside the bunkers for the civvies. She leaned the two she had collected against the wall, flashing back to where she had left the kunai. She repeated it until her entire section was in the bunkers, and there were more people trickling in. She looked around, noting the lack of civvies in the stadium, then noticed the red-tailed hawk flying high above the stadium. Genma flashed over to stand next to her for a moment. The second phase has begun. Kill as many Suna shinobi as you can. They are the enemy, the more that don't live, the less there are to kill our allies later. Got it, Tenten nodded nervously. I have a seal set on top of the roof. Start there, and get to work, Genma instructed. I'll back you up. Tenten took a deep breath to steady herself, then her eye shined up to the rooftop, F-top. She'd killed before, but it had been bandits, people she knew didn't have anyone to go home to. She took another deep breath, then spread a scroll in front of her. It was filled with Hiraishin weapons, and she unsealed them in a spread. The weapons flew, impaling the slower shinobi, some dying on the spot, others looking up to where she was standing, folding her scroll away. Weapons flew at her, but her eye shined to one of the impaled, but not dead shinobi, drawing a tanto and removing their head. She repeated it, Genma flickering in and out alongside her, taking out those she wasn't. Good job, he called when the section of street had been cleared. Let's move on and repeat. Tenten nodded shakily, focusing on Genma instead of the blood caking her hands and clothing. His expression softened, and he clapped her on the shoulder. I hate to say it, but you'll get used to it. A terrible truth, but can be reassuring. Push it out of your mind, and break down later. Right now, we don't have the time. Tenten nodded again, swallowing bile, and taking a deep breath. All right, I can do that. Genma smiled softly. Come on, we have a village we need to defend. When it finally stopped and everyone retreated, Tenten immediately located a trash can and threw up. Genma appeared next to her, rubbing her back. Hey, it's all right, it's over. Tenten slumped to the ground once she was done emptying her stomach. They had families and friends, she whispered miserably. And so do we, Genma said, sitting next to her. It's a hard thing to learn, but in war, it's either their family mourns, or yours does. It's a difficult truth, but in war, no one is right or wrong. Does it get any better? She mumbled, leaning into him slightly. He wrapped an arm around her. Somewhat. It gets easier to ignore. Easier to justify. That person could have killed my teammate later, he could take out a genin later. Genma sighed. It's best not to think about it too hard. Word of advice though, do not ask Kakashi how he deals with it because he doesn't. Tenten giggled wetly. Is Guy-sensei a better option? Genma made a groaning noise. Theoretically, he's somewhat sane. But maybe stick to someone who acts saner, Tenten giggled again, wiping at her eyes. Thanks, Genma-sensei. No problem kid. The third Hokage was one of many casualties, although luckily due to Konoha's emergency evacuation protocols, the civilian casualties were lower than they could have been. Shinobi casualties weren't all that high, and next to nothing compared to the Sunanin's death toll. Tenten kept getting congratulations for her death count, which was quite high, and she hated it with a passion. Logically she could understand, she had killed attackers, people invading their village and trying to kill everyone inside. But they had been people too, they'd had families, friends, lovers, children. Tenten sighed quietly. As far as she could see and tell, neither Neji nor Lee were having any problems, although Guy seemed determined to work them into the ground for the time being. The village needed to be reconstructed in some areas, and with Guy as their sensei, her team was used as pack mules for transportation for everything from wood beams to cement. On the plus side, she had yet to suffer from any nightmares, her body too exhausted to dream from the manual labor. She was grateful and extremely sore. Any rest days were spent sleeping, for the most part, gathering energy for the next day. Luckily, her apartment had been in one of the mostly undamaged sections of the village, even if Lee's apartment had been destroyed and now she was temporarily sharing with him until his apartment was rebuilt. Lee was a good housemate thankfully, insisting on cooking dinner every other night, cleaning up after himself, and generally being incredibly polite. When it finally slowed down, Lee moved back out and into his apartment. The village was mostly reconstructed, people had mostly moved on from mourning, and Guy slowed down their pace to its usual one. With energy to spare now, Tenten started having vivid nightmares. The first time it happened she weathered the resulting panic attack when she woke up alone, activating the silencing seals around her apartment so she didn't disturb the neighbors. The second time she couldn't manage on her own anymore, so with Genma out of town, she wandered across town to where Guy-sensei's house was. She hesitated before knocking, but the door opened before she could knock. Guy looked about like he always did, with the exception of being in a pair of looser pants and t-shirt. Still bright green, however. Tenten, is something wrong? The concern on his face almost made her start crying right there, and he quickly ushered her inside. He settled her on the couch, bustling around to start tea and grab tissues. Did you have a nightmare? Guy asked softly, sitting next to her as an open invitation. Tenten took it, leaning into him for a hug. She mumbled. Her hair was down, she hadn't bothered pulling it up when she left, and she felt Guy's hand running through her hair in an attempt to comfort her. I have them quite often, Guy admitted quietly. You don't get to be a shinobi and not have trauma. How do you manage? Tenten whispered. Depends on the nightmare, Guy decided after a moment. If it's the death of friends, I find it's helpful to have very recent pictures nearby, or if they're available, go to them, they'll understand. If it's the kind I suspect you're having, there's no specific way universal to all. You just have to work out what works best for you. Tenten paused for a moment. Genma-sensei said not to ask Kakashi, but how does he deal with it? Guy sighed, looking about a decade older all of a sudden. He washes his hands raw. It's why he wears gloves all of the time, he sees phantom blood there. Tenten blinked sleepily. That doesn't sound great. It would be why Genma said not to ask him, Guy said, chuckling quietly. You can stay on the couch for the night if you wish. Tenten was too tired to disagree, 2 nights of lack of sleep catching up to her. She just hummed sleepily. When she woke up in the morning, it was to the smells of breakfast. Guy was in the kitchen, wearing a truly awful pink apron with bright green stripes. Ah, good morning Tenten, he declared, back to his usual volume. Morning Guy-sensei, Tenten replied, at a far lower volume, rubbing her eyes. Do you always do this? Yes, I find it far more pleasurable to wake up and have homemade breakfast than any sort of ration bar. Also far more filling and healthy. For some odd reason, as he said it, he glared at a picture of Kakashi and him set on the counter. All right, Tenten agreed, with no little amusement. I usually just reheat any leftovers from dinner. That is also a worthy meal. Guy declared. Do you want any help? Tenten asked after a moment. No, it is almost done, my youthful student. Also, you are a guest here, and need not help. Tenten, long used to Guy's views on politeness and loud volume, simply hummed an affirmative and sat at the table, starting to pull her hair up into its usual twin buns. When he set food on the table, Guy seemed mildly confused at her slow pace on doing her hair. Are you not capable of a much higher speed? Yeah, Tenten agreed, fastening the second bun into place. But those are hasty and fall apart after a while. These'll last all day, I will take your word for it, Guy decided, setting a plate and chopsticks in front of her. If her teammates were confused by her and Guy arriving together, they didn't show it, or ask her about it. She was grateful for it. They went through their morning stretches, then the run. Neji, remain at rest until Lee and I finish, Guy said, pausing when Neji stopped running to flop on the ground. I wish for a different schedule this time. Neji nodded, putting his arm over his eyes. Tenten hummed an affirmation, assuming that either Genma was coming over, or she'd spar with Guy. Both had happened before. With Guy they worked on her close combat weapons usually. He always held back to the right point to challenge her, but not outright destroy her, or make it seem like he was letting her win. Tenten fiddled with different weapons, cleaning, polishing, and sharpening the ones that needed it. With the invasion and the recovery from it, she hadn't had time for much of anything, even polishing and sharpening some of her weapons that she rarely used. She needed to check on the crows after lunch actually, she hadn't managed to do it in the chaos that was the last week or two. She'd have to go through the village on her way to the Naka cliff, to check for any of the fruits the birds enjoyed. She had plenty of jerky and dried fruit, but the birds preferred fresh fruit when possible. She snuck a glance at Neji, who was now doing stretches so he didn't cool off too much. He didn't seem particularly concerned, although he rarely seemed concerned about anything, let alone a changed schedule. In the end, she sparred with Guy. All out, she called, somewhat worriedly. All out, Guy shouted cheerily. I want to see what you can do with Horaishin. Tenten took a deep steadying breath. Right, she could do this. Fight her teacher with Horaishin. No big deal. She summoned a full set of kunai to her hands, ready to throw them. All right, let's go. Guy beamed, and she threw them, only partially trying to hit Guy. She knew he'd dodge, and she needed the kunai out there to teleport to. After her brutal fight with Guy, mostly brutal on her chakra stores and stamina, although she would probably have bruises for weeks, she went home to shower quickly, then headed through the village. She grabbed a couple oranges from a seller, passing him the coins with an easy smile, sealing away 2 of the 3 she'd bought. She started peeling the third absently, dropping the peels in random trash cans she passed. It was fully peeled by the time she reached the Naka River, where the crows usually hung out. Hey guys, she announced her presence with a soft call. Cue enthusiastic cawing from the crows, who started landing on her shoulders and head to try and get at the orange, which she hid in her pocket. Off, she told them sternly. You can't have it if you're sitting on my head. They were reluctant, but the promise of orange pieces dragged them off her head and back to the ground in front of her. She pulled the orange out again and they went wild, hopping and flying around in circles, trying to catch her attention. She laughed, pulling off a small piece of the orange and throwing it up into the air. 3 different ones dove at it, only one got it. Take turns, she admonished them, tossing another piece. The crows immediately lined up in an impressively straight line to beg for a piece of orange. She laughed, and started handing out orange. They were smart creatures, although sometimes she worried they were just a little bit too smart. She was fairly sure they were summons, she'd seen a couple disappear in puffs of smoke then reappear later, which meant they were probably an active summoning contract, but she didn't know why they resided here. From what she remembered, summons generally had their own place in the summoning realm. Once she'd managed to feed them all a bit of orange, one of the first she'd fed that had flown off, came back. Clutched in its talons was a scroll. It wasn't the first time they'd brought stuff for her to have, nor would it probably be the last. They had a tendency to try and give equal to what she gave them. Generally it was random weapons, various old kunai and senbon and shuriken. Once they even brought back an entire tanto that she actually still had, along with its shoulder holster. It had been in fairly good condition, only needing some minor sharpening and getting rid of a tiny bit of rust along with cleaning up the holster. It dropped the scroll in her outstretched hand, and another crow dropped a second one in her hand a moment later. A third landed on her shoulder. Which do I read first? She asked, inspecting both. One was a simple scroll, engraved on the ends with crows and tied with a simple red ribbon. The other was sealed with wax, a Sharingan pattern pressed into it. That, along with the Uchiha symbol carved into the ends of the scroll, meant it was a fairly old scroll. There simply weren't scrolls like that around anymore. Not since the massacre. The crow on her shoulder hopped down her arm and nudged the first one that had been dropped off before moving back to her shoulder. So she tucked the second scroll into her pocket to hold it, and carefully broke the wax seal. She gently opened the scroll, mindful of any damage it might have collected in the time the crows had it. It was surprisingly pretty much entirely intact, the only signs of wear and tear being some blood stains she doubted came from crows. To anyone who is reading this, I can only imagine who you might be, but if you are reading this, you have been vetted by the crows and they have deemed you a worthy holder of their contract. I am Itachi Uchiha, and one of the last 3 Uchiha alive, and I am the second holder of the crow contract. The first was my cousin Shisui Uchiha. Enclosed within is his bingo book page, one he himself edited out of sheer annoyance. Tenten unrolled it further and found the page. Amusingly, several things had been crossed out and fixed, mostly with larger numbers. A few things had also been added at the bottom, including an affinity for genjutsu, something about a fancy Sharingan, and strangely enough, a comment about perfect eyeliner. She decided not to question it too much. He was a Junin. Junin were always a bit strange. He was pretty good looking, but he was an Uchiha. They were pretty much infamous for being unfairly pretty, and Shisui was no exception. Wait, that holster. She recognized it. It looked like the one the crows had brought her a while ago. Had it been his? If the crows did their job correctly, you will have received a tanto in holster. It belonged to Shisui, and I preserved it with the intention of passing it on alongside the contract. He wouldn't have wanted it burned or buried with him, preferring to have it protect someone else when he wasn't able to with his death. If the Uchiha massacre is still recent, do not look into it until you know the risks. Powerful people were involved in it. It wasn't just me snapping and killing everyone besides my younger brother. People more powerful than me pulled the strings of a 16-year-old boy and forced him into a position where his only option was suicide, and pulled the strings of a 13-year-old boy and forced him into a position where it was kill or have a civil war. I cannot explain here, couldn't even begin to cover the tragedy of the Uchiha massacre, but I can offer this. Should I still be alive, send the crows with a message and I will offer the information in person. If I am not, I will have set up a trail of clues and leads to ensure the information does not die with me. In either event, I wish you luck, and give you the crow summoning contract. Sign your name in your own blood, then put a bloody handprint of your dominant hand at the bottom. The crows will come when summoned. They are well trained, and can write and read Japanese, as well as understand Konoha civilian, shinobi, and Anbu sign language. I wish you luck, Itachi Uchiha. Tenten needed to sit down. That was a lot. She plopped down on the ground, startling the crows around her a little bit, but they soon settled back down. That was a lot to take in. What risks was Itachi talking about? And why did he seem to separate looking into the massacre from asking him for information? And was she seriously considering actually asking Itachi Uchiha, the famed perpetrator of the Uchiha fricking massacre, for information about this? Although most of what was in the letter was extremely concerning, she hadn't known Itachi was 13 when the massacre happened. He had been what was her age now, and forced into that from what had been said. One of the crows pulled the other scroll out of her pocket and dropped it in front of her insistently. They wanted her to sign it. It seemed like the contract held a lot of weight. She couldn't decide whether to be honored she was picked, or concerned about shouldering it. She picked honored for now. She carefully untied the ribbon, then opened the scroll. It was small, 4 boxes there. She suspected it'd expand later, or would be expanded somehow. The first signature was Shisui Uchiha, and a small handprint. It must have been signed when he was young. The second was Itachi Uchiha, and had similarly small handprint, although slightly larger than the first. She bit her thumb and forefinger, writing her name, Tenten, then smearing blood across her hand and making a handprint. It was larger than the other two and she couldn't help but feel a bit sad. It didn't sound like either Uchiha had a childhood at all, if being Junin at 16 and 13 respectively said anything. The crows squawked and flapped their wings around her, and she just stared at the scroll. They celebrated a new summoner, and Tenten ever so carefully tied up both scrolls, storing them away in a seal she carefully visualized into being over her heart. Storage seals were easy. She could do them without difficulty. I'll see you guys later, she said to the crows. I need to get into town. It's getting late and I'm tired. They crowed at her in farewell and she left, looking no different than when she'd entered the area, the new seal hidden by her shirt, everything she'd learned tucked away safely in her head. Perhaps she'd ask Kakashi or Guy tomorrow if they knew anything about Itachi and Shisui. It couldn't hurt to ask. She reached her apartment, and found nothing in the fridge. Going out it was then. She didn't have the energy to cook tonight. Not tonight, not after the spar with Guy and the whole mess with the crows. She did put up a reminder to go grocery shopping though. She'd need to tomorrow. Perhaps she'd take out the tanto and resize the holster enough to fit her so she could wear it around. She didn't generally wear weapons, but she might as well with that one. Maybe if she couldn't sleep or woke up from a nightmare again. Her nightmares ended up filled to the brim with crows and rivers of blood, corpses piled high, and Itachi standing in the middle of it all, staring at her almost menacingly. She didn't sleep again that night and spent the rest of it resizing the holster to fit her instead. The next day was a rest day, for which Tenten was grateful. She didn't think she could manage practice after all of yesterday. Plus she had things to do. Primarily grocery shopping. While out, at some point, Kakashi ended up walking with her. She wasn't entirely sure when it happened, it just did. So, is there a reason you're accompanying me on my grocery trip? Tenten asked casually, knowing full well anything else would scare the guy away. He was weird like that. You look tired. Having nightmares all night does that to a person, she remarked, staring straight ahead. I suppose you would know that though. Kakashi just grunted. Did you know an Uchiha by the name of Shisui? Tenten asked curiously. She knew her teacher's eternal rival and best friend had been in Anbu for a long time, maybe he knew of the two. Why? Kakashi asked suspiciously. Tenten traced the edge of the harness. No particular reason, just curious. Curiosity can get you killed. The saying is curiosity killed the cat, but satisfaction brought it back. Satisfaction won't bring anyone back. Nor will it change what happened. Asked Genma. He knew Shisui. Tenten watched his back disappear into the crowd. That was weird. Kakashi in general was weird though. Well, it looked like she was finding and asking Genma today instead. She didn't actually find him until late afternoon, after shopping and a nap prompted by the concerned crows that somehow got into her apartment just to parent her. Tenten, I didn't think I'd see you today, Genma trailed off as he turned around and saw her. Where did you get that holster? Tenten touched it with one hand, then looked around at the very deliberately not at all interested Junin. Maybe let's go somewhere with less eavesdroppers and I'll tell you, she offered, staring at the Junin and Chunin around them. They had the good grace to at least look somewhat sheepish. Right, my apartment is reinforced and sealed up pretty tightly, we can go there, Genma said after a moment's hesitation. I was going to show you something I found we can work on anyway. We can talk while I show you. Tenten nodded agreement and followed behind him when he shunshined away. Genma sealed up the apartment behind them once they arrived, then sunk onto the couch. Tenten sat across from him in the sole armchair. He looked tired all of a sudden, rubbing a hand over his face. Guy warned me you guys got the caravan to Iron Mission. Warned me that you were speaking to the crows. Should have known it would lead to this. Tenten tilted her head, remembering Itachi's warning about knowing the risks before she looked too far. If you can't or don't want to talk about it that's fine, Tenten offered. We can work on the thing. No, it's high time someone knew about the boys, Genma replied quietly. That's what they were, just boys, children caught up in a war that shouldn't have been theirs to get caught in the middle of. Tenten listened quietly, unwilling to interrupt him and risk not getting the information she wanted. They were both on an Anbu squad with me, Genma said, putting his feet up on the coffee table. Weasel and Squirrel, Shisui, Squirrel, wasn't common in the squad, he wasn't quite an Anbu, more of a person who had the clearance and the ability to be on call if a mission required him. They were small, but Kakashi wasn't all that much older than them anyway, so we accepted it without too much difficulty. We should have questioned it when Shisui disappeared without a trace and it was labeled suicide. Genma took his feet off the table and leaned forward, hiding his face in his hands. We should have questioned it when Itachi, who'd previously shown no inclination towards genocide, suddenly slaughtered his entire clan, not even a week after Shisui's death. Tenten hardly dared to breath, carefully storing away the information. Shisui's holster and tanto looked just like that, Genma said after a long moment, voice shaky. His body was looked for, by the stars we looked for it, combing the Naka River and surrounding forests, but we found nothing. Not even his holster or tanto. Tenten gently touched the holster again. This is his. The crows had it. Genma's head shot up, and Tenten tactfully ignored the slightly damp face and puffy eyes. It is. I thought it looked just like his. They also had a note in their contract, Tenten added carefully. I have both with me. Genma paled ever so slightly. Keep both of those on you and hidden at all times. Not even when you think you're alone can you read it, and not in your apartment until I go in and help you seal it completely up. Tenten nodded wordlessly. May I see the note? Genma asked quietly, and Tenten handed it over after she unsealed it and pulled it from under her shirt. He read it quietly, and she was pretty sure he just stared at it for a while without reading afterwards. He handed it back a moment later and Tenten resealed it. That's dangerous information, Genma said at last. But it lines up. Itachi is correct though, Tenten, he was involved with dangerous people still in Konoha, and you are only a genin, a chunin if you are promoted because of the exam. He was a junin, even with Hiraishin you can't stand against them. Tenten wondered who these dangerous people were. There were only so many people in the village it could be. She'd keep an ear to the winds and try and figure it out. She'd have to put pieces together without people knowing she had any pieces at all, it seemed. Well, she'd wanted to be a sneaky undercover type of ninja as a kid, might as well try now. Genma took a deep breath, and Tenten looked up at him quizzically. Let's take a look at what I wanted to show you him. A better note to end on than that anyway. Yeah, Tenten agreed quietly, wondering if the holster was why Kakashi had started walking next to her earlier. He'd seen it then thought it was Shisui's. Well, it was, even if she'd had to adjust it quite a fair amount to fit her far slimmer shoulders. It probably was. She wondered if Kakashi would give her the same warning to beware the risks of looking into this. He probably would just as cryptically as possible, knowing him. Tenten was still deep in thought when she left Genma's house when it started getting dark. The seal had helped take her mind off it a little bit, although not by much. She did have to wonder where he'd found the massive seal though. They'd only managed to decode a portion of it, and so far, it looked like some sort of weird storage seal except not. She somehow ended up near the gates when they opened to show Naruto parading triumphantly in, 2 Sannin following him. Jiraiya and Tsunade along with a third person who looked about Genma or Kakashi's age. Tenten hadn't ever thought she'd actually get to meet the slug Sannin. She had famously gone rouge from the village and swore never to return, but here she was. Tenten had idolized the woman when she was younger, and still admired her strength, even if she knew she couldn't follow in the slug Sannin's footsteps as a medic. Tenten, Naruto greeted her cheerfully and loudly. Come to see us when we came in. It was coincidence, she informed him. Jiraiya, Tsunade, she inclined her head to the Sannin respectfully. She smiled apologetically at the third person. I'm afraid I don't know your name. Shizune, the woman replied, smiling politely. Tenten nodded, storing the name away. All right, let's get this over with. Tsunade said. Well, Borderline shouted. Come on Squirt, if we're doing this you're going to be there to suffer too. Where are you going? Tenten asked Shizune, who seemed the least crazy. Tsunade agreed to be the 5th Hokage. Shizune sighed quietly, clutching her tiny pig closer. It was a very cute tiny pig. So we must inform the elders. Tenten wasn't afraid to admit it took her a moment to come up with their names. Kaharu, Homera, and Danzo. The unofficial council behind the Hokage. Tenten paused mentally. They were powerful, and had much influence in the village itself. She'd have to look into them as the dangerous people Genma and Itachi had mentioned. Makes sense. Want some reasonable company? I'm not doing anything else, Tenten offered. Please, Shizune sighed in relief. I would certainly appreciate it if you could. Tenten turned her head as a crow approached her and landed on her shoulder to hand her a note. She took it, and snorted at the very shaky katakana vaguely reading, dinner here or dinner out. She assumed the crows were trying to ask if she would be eating dinner out in the village or if she'd cook. I'll get something from a restaurant, she told the crow. It bobbed its head, and flew off. What was that about? Shizune asked, looking amused as they assumed a position behind the Sannin and Naruto. The crows being concerned about my health, Tenten replied, huffing. They've been even worse about it since I signed their contract. You have a contract with the crows? Shizune asked, looking interested. I can't say I've heard about that one, although isn't Itachi Uchiha rumored to be able to summon crows? I wouldn't know, Tenten said after a moment. He was. He was signed to the same contract she had, but Shizune didn't need to know that. I think I've heard that before. Maybe, Shizune agreed, looking at her askance. Who's your sensei? Made a guy, Tenten admitted, smiling sheepishly. I train under Genma a lot though. We share similar interests. Poisons, Shizune guessed, a curious glint in her eyes. Seals, Tenten corrected. Although I wouldn't be against picking up some poisons for my blades, that might be advisable since I'm probably in the bingo book now. Well, if you ever need a break from dumb boys, Shizune said, giggling slightly. I'm always up to teach someone some poisons. What kind of fighter are you? Tenten paused. Well, I suppose I'm mid to long range or close range, depending on what's needed. Shizune raised an eyebrow at her. What's that even mean? I'm a weapons specialist that might have mastered Hiraishin, Tenten said sheepishly. Oh no, Jiraiya's in earshot. Oh no, well, maybe not mastered, but I can do it. And place my own markers. Jiraiya turned around slowly, walking backwards. You what? How? Well, Genma knew a variation of Hiraishin, so we figured out how it worked with what he knew, then reverse engineered it, Tenten explained. It took a while, but we got it done, and now we can both do it. On your own, Jiraiya pressed. On our own, yeah, Tenten agreed. She summoned a Hiraishin kunai from her hip seal, and tossed it to him. Keep walking, I'll Hiraishin up to you in a moment. She let them all keep walking, and once they were almost out of eyeshot, she Hiraishined right to the seal Jiraiya was holding. She got 4 gobsmacked expressions. What? That's like the yellow flash. Naruto shouted, looking more excited than ever. Like the 4th Hokage, it is his jutsu, Tenten agreed. But you aren't yellow, Naruto continued. More like a silver flash. Yeah, that sounds cool. Silver flash, she had to admit it did sound cool. You actually did it, Jiraiya muttered, staring at the kunai he was still holding. You actually can do Hiraishin. Yeah, it's what I said, Tenten said, mildly confused. I think I'll be teaching you poisons, Shizune said after a long moment. You might need it. Tenten wasn't about to pass up a chance to learn some more, so she just nodded. Come by my new office in a few days, kid, Tsunade barked at her. Once things are settled in. Okay, Tenten said, fairly bewildered. I'll find you later for a discussion with you and your teacher, Jiraiya told her firmly, handing her the kunai back. She just nodded, now thoroughly confused. You don't need me, do you, Tsunade-sama? Shizune said, in a tone that implied this wasn't really under Tsunade's control. Nope, have fun, kid. Shizune smiled at Tenten. Why don't we get some dinner? I'm starving. Tenten's stomach grumbled at her, and Tenten smiled sheepishly. Looks like I am too. Anywhere in mind. They ended up at Ichiraku Ramen for some reason, not that Tenten was complaining, it was good food, and high in calories, good for refueling. The pig accompanied them, although it was sitting at Shizune's feet obediently, and had gotten a plate of scraps from the cook. When did you finish learning Hiraishin? Shizune asked after they were both starting in on their second bowl of ramen. Tenten tried to count the weeks back. Not very long ago. I'm sorry I haven't been keeping track of the days. I did have it done by the Chunin exam's 3rd round. I used it then and in the invasion following it. You'll want to keep an eye on the next Suna bingo book then, Shizune sighed. They'll put a warning out for you, even if they don't know who you are yet since you are a genin still. I'll see if I can find a copy, Tenten agreed, finishing off the last of her broth. Why do you want to teach me poisons all of a sudden? Not that I mind, you're still young, and if you've shown Hiraishin where other nations could see, you're going to be targeted, Shizune explained, signaling for another bowl for both of them. The more chance you have of killing anyone who tries to kill you, the higher your survival chances will be. Letting you learn poisons will help on missions and things. It'll help make sure you don't die too early. Tenten stared at the new bowl. Right, Hiraishin was dangerous. The 4th Hokage had slaughtered thousands of people in an instant during the last war. He had been a serious threat when he was alive. She had the chance to be an equally bad threat. Of course they'd try and eliminate her before she got too powerful and hard to kill. With any luck, Guy and Genma and I can help keep you alive until you're powerful enough to stand on your own and keep yourself safe, Shizune said, stirring the ramen without really eating it. Tenten put a bite in her mouth on habit, not really tasting it anymore. They're all going to be targeting me? Tenten asked quietly. It was about to get a lot more dangerous for her teammates. She was suddenly glad Genma and Guy both agreed she had a high chance of making Chunin, which meant she didn't have to go out on missions with her teammates. She could, but she didn't need to. It'd let her dictate her own schedule a little bit too, squeeze in more training with other people when possible. Iwa especially, Shizune agreed. They suffered the most because of Minato in the last war. They're going to be very keen on stopping a threat like that from popping up again. I'll just have to be careful, Tenten said, taking another bite. It tasted like sawdust, but she ate it anyway. Very careful. We'll train you as much as possible as quickly as we can to get you up to A rank at least, Shizune reassured her. Poisons will help put people in the ground. Getting faster with Hiraishin will also help. Learn more melee weapons too, just in case. I'm working on more of those, Tenten admitted. I'd like to work on the Tanto more next. I don't know anything besides the very basics. I'm sure we can find someone to train you, Shizune said, smiling. She put money on the counter. Even at a glance Tenten could tell it covered both of them. Dinner on me, I have a feeling you'll need the energy for tomorrow. She left before Tenten could protest, the little pig toddling after her. Tenten drained her bowl, handing it back to the chef before getting up and leaving as well. As she walked home she stared up at the stars and wondered how on earth the cards had managed to fall so that she had not only surpassed her teammates, a feat she previously hadn't thought she'd manage without far more time, but she had managed to draw the attention of both Sanin and line up even more teaching for herself. An interesting day, that was for sure. The crows greeted her when she got home, demanding pets and to know if she'd eaten. She reassured them she had, then got ready for bed and passed out. They did have practice the next morning, so Tenten got up stupidly early, cooked herself breakfast and a packed lunch from those leftovers, ate, and headed towards their usual training ground. Honestly, she was just grateful she hadn't had any nightmares the previous night, or at least none she could remember. She was slowly adjusting to the killing from the invasion, but she was adjusting. Hey boys, Tenten called to them, waving. Neji didn't bother acknowledging her. He must still be sulking about her defeating him in front of almost all of Konoha. Boys. Hello Tenten. Lee greeted her cheerfully. How are you? Did you know Naruto got back? I saw him at the gate, so yes I did, Tenten agreed, sitting next to him. They were all early. Guy would be a bit late, probably pestering Kakashi for another challenge or something. He brought back Tsunade. Yosh, he is very youthful, Lee said, grinning. I see you have had a wardrobe change. Tenten, who'd forgotten she was wearing the holster and Tanto, reached up to touch it. Oh, yeah, I was planning on getting better at the Tanto and found this holster, so I figured I might as well use it. It looks cool, so I figured I'd add it. It does look very nice. Lee praised, giving 2 thumbs up. Thanks Lee, Tenten agreed, pulling out the Tanto to run over it for any rust and to make sure it was sharp. It was a high-quality blade, it needed to be taken care of. That's an Uchiha-style Tanto, Neji said, startling Tenten slightly. Huh, she asked, although she'd already figured that, since it had belonged to an Uchiha. The Tanto. The Uchiha made Tantos in a specific way, that's an Uchiha-style Tanto, Neji said coolly. I'm surprised you didn't notice. I've also never owned an Uchiha-style Tanto, Tenten huffed. And I haven't exactly tried to compare it to my other ones. Of which she had 4. She drew out the other 4. It took a moment to find them, but she managed it and laid the 4 out with Shisui's in the middle. She'd known the 4 were all different styles, she'd collected them on various missions to random places. The one on the far left was a pretty badly done one, but she could still chuck it at people, so she did. If it broke then it'd just hurt whoever she threw it at more. The one next to it was Kumo style, shorter and able to channel lightning chakra. Then Shisui's, longer than both of them, but not long enough for a katana. The one after that was from the land of iron and slightly blued, made with excellent steelwork and able to channel pure chakra through it. The one on the far right was from an unidentified place, although after learning how to check things for seals she was sure it was covered in seal work. It was longer than the Kumo one, but not by much. Well now I can identify something directly Uchiha style, Tenten noted, staring at the 5 Tanto intently before turning her gaze on Neji. But how did you know? Neji grimaced at Tenten like she was torturing him or something, but pointed at the handle. There's an Uchiha crest on the handle. Barely visible, I'm not surprised you didn't notice it. Tenten blinked in surprise and checked the handle. Sure enough, there was a barely visible Uchiha fan on the handle. When did you get the Uchiha Tanto? Neji asked, narrowing his eyes. Tenten debated lying about it, then decided the boys could pick whether to believe the truth or not. The crows gave it to me. I guess they had it stored somewhere. I had to clean and sharpen it of course, but it and the harness I'm wearing were in good shape. Probably only been there for 8 or so years. Neji just made an unamused noise, staring at the Tontos. Tenten wondered exactly why he seemed so interested in it, but opted to brush it off, sealing the Tontos away and resheathing the Uchiha one on her back. Guy arrived a moment later, grinning like he'd won one of the challenges with Kakashi. My youthful students, we have a new Hokage, if you have not already heard of the news. Lee and Neji obviously hadn't heard yet, based on the surprised expressions. This does mean that Chunin promotions can officially be handed out, Guy added, beaming. Tenten could almost see the sun reflecting off his teeth. Tenten, my beautiful lotus, you have bloomed so amazingly and have been promoted. Our esteemed Hokage summons you before her immediately. Tenten blinked, stunned. Right now, indeed. She assures me you shall be back before training ends, so you need not worry about that. I wasn't particularly worried about that, but thank you sensei, Tenten said, her face falling into the amused look she knew she wore 85% of the time she was around her team. Oh well, time to meet their Hokage properly. And for a promotion too. Who knew? Well, Genma had guessed she would be promoted, so this probably shouldn't be quite so much of a shock. Hokage Tower was across the village, and Tenten had a seal there already, so she teleported to the seal that was at the base of the tower and walked in. Shikamaru and Shino were both there when she entered, and Tsunade was sitting at her desk with Shizune P. her. Now that you're all here, I'll get to the point, Tsunade said, leaning heavily on one arm. Congrats, you moved up, you get a fancy vest and more responsibility, congratulations, Shu. Tenten snorted as she caught Shizune rolling her eyes exasperatedly. Great, Shikamaru groaned, but fetched his vest and left. Shino inclined his head politely and followed suit. Jiraiya should be with your sensei at Training Ground 18, Tsunade told Tenten. Guy knows this, so you're fine to go. Tenten inclined her head and reached for the marker closest to Training Ground 18 after grabbing her new vest. She walked the rest of the way, and found Genma and Jiraiya hunched over a table that definitely hadn't been in this training ground last Tenten was here. I'm here, she said, dodging the automatic Senbon that flew at her arm. A thing she was very used to. Oh, Tenten, hello, Genma sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. This is Jiraiya, but I guess you've already met him. I have, Tenten agreed, joining them at the table. Alright, I assume I don't have to impress on you how dangerous the fact that other nations now know that you have Hiraishin, right? Jiraiya started with, I got the gist, Tenten agreed, remembering the talk with Shizune. Good, Jiraiya said, it's a problem for both of you, but mostly for you. You're barely a Chunin, and you've been a shinobi for what, a year? Tenten nodded, a year and a few months. Right, whatever. Genma's been a special Junin for years, and trained with Minato beforehand, on top of having his own specialization. He's strong enough to stand on his own, even with everyone gunning for him since he has the Hiraishin at his disposal. You don't have any of that. What do you have anyway? Weapons, Tenten said frankly. I'm skilled in a vast number of them, and passable in even more. I can use any weapon you give me with some degree of proficiency. My aim is better than Genma's last we checked. I have a summoning contract with the crows, and I'm relatively good at Fuinjutsu. Yeah, great, whatever, but that won't get you very far. Jiraiya replied, brutally. Genma agrees with me, we need you stronger and quick before we let you out of the village. Suna's going to have you in their bingo book as fast as possible, and that will put every bounty hunter on your tail. And all the other villages will be trying to hunt both of us down, Genma added. I was in the bingo book before, but you weren't. You're coming out of nowhere, and everyone's going to be lining up to try and kill you. Great, I get that, Tenten snapped back. So what are we doing about it? We're hijacking you from Guy, Jiraiya said. I'm heading back out with Naruto again in a couple of months. I'm going to stuff you full of everything I know about Uzushio and their sealing style, as well as everything I can teach you about seals. Shizune and I will also help you in matters of poisons, Genma added. And Kurenai's offered to teach you some genjutsu that'll help you with your weapons. Genjutsu that move with you and will confuse everyone. Kakashi and Hyuga have offered to teach you more Tanto and Katana respectively as well. How did you get the crow summoning contract anyway? Jiraiya asked suspiciously. The crows gave it to me, Tenten said, dipping her head. They aren't a usual summoning contract, they don't have a realm in the summoning lands. Jiraiya frowned. They live around Konoha. They're the murder near the Naka River, Tenten agreed. I guess they deemed me worthy of their contract. Are you the first person to have a contract with them? Jiraiya asked, narrowing his eyes. No, Uchiha Shisui and Uchiha Itachi both have signed it. Tenten tapped a finger against her leg. I can't find out who Shisui is though, it's like he never existed. I can't tell you a lot, Genma spoke up hesitantly. But Shisui wasn't a person to be taken lightly. And he wasn't someone who disappears quietly. If you can't find anything about him, that's not a good sign. Forces are always at work inside the village, Jiraiya replied cryptically. Alright kid, what's your schedule look like? And how much can we overload it before it's too much? Since I'm a chunin and you said you aren't letting Guy keep me anymore, I guess I don't really have a schedule, Tenten replied, shrugging. You're an orphan right? Genma guessed. At her nod, he continued. How many D ranks do you need to complete in a week to keep rent paid and yourself fed? Tenten considered it. It depends on the D rank, but I have a fair amount saved up as a last resort. I could use that instead of continuing with missions. No, keep that, Genma said, shaking his head. I'll see what I can do to convince someone to let me take you on a couple bigger missions sometime. Better sooner rather than later, Jiraiya warned. Get to work on a schedule, I have research to do, he grinned lecherously, and Tenten made a mental note not to go near public bathing houses while he was in town. And warn what women she could as well. If you do anything even remotely unsavory in any direction anywhere near Tenten I will be making sure you cannot have children, Genma threatened calmly. Jiraiya's hands shot to his crotch, and Tenten suppressed a giggle. I won't, Jiraiya said, with a very unmanly squeak. With Tenten's new schedule, days were hectic. In the end, Genma decided not to bother with missions, and just made her eat with him for dinners and lunches, and transferred the automatic taking out of the money for her rent to his bank account. Despite numerous protests from her, she still took care of her own breakfast, which was good by her. It left her something she could still do on her own, excluding the loads of homework she often had from Jiraiya and Shizune. She was slightly grateful she wasn't dealing with dinner or lunch anymore, since her kitchen had started getting overrun by materials for poisons, and general poison things. She was starting to amass a collection of poison scrolls exclusively filled with poisons, alongside a matching antidote scroll, which held all the antidotes for every poison Shizune could come up with, and then some from Tsunade. Her skill with the Tanto and Katana were improving by the day from sparring with Kakashi and Hyuga, plus some extra tutoring on the side from Kurenai regarding Genjutsu, both doing them, and breaking out of them. Then Sasuke thought it'd be a great idea to run away. And Shikamaru followed him, completely forgetting she even existed on their chase, taking Neji, Choji, Kiba, and Naruto. She could understand not taking Lee, who was still injured, or even not taking Sakura and Ino who were, Tenten hated to say it but it was true, pretty much useless. Hinata was excusable since they were already taking her cousin, who was older and had more experience with the Byakugan. But not taking her or Shino, the only other two shinobi of their generation who made Chunin on their first try. That was stupidity Tenten didn't think she'd see from someone of the Nara clan. Then again they were pretty as a clan, so perhaps that was why. It was a stupid reason anyway. She was on break for the moment, resting after being healed by Tsunade after Kakashi accidentally almost gutted her. She was still slightly annoyed at him for that one. Shino sat down next to her. I assume you heard the news. Yeah, who didn't? Tenten scoffed. The Uchiha heir, the last Uchiha, running away like a rat running away from a cat. Worse, considering he is betraying the village. Shino said darkly. Worse indeed, Tenten agreed calmly, ignoring the angry buzzing of the Aburame next to her. She paused. What was Lee's marker doing, moving away from the village like that? Is something the matter? Shino asked curiously. Lee's leaving the village. I can sense the marker I put on him running after the party. Shino frowned. Is he not still injured? Yeah, he is, Tenten said, frowning. Despite his best attempts to pretend otherwise after the invasion. Ah yes, you roomed with him for a while, yes. Tenten didn't want to know how he knew that. Yeah, he should still be on crutches, despite Tsunade's best efforts. Shino stood up. We'd better go fetch him then. We'd better tell Tsunade and then go fetch him, Tenten suggested instead. Then she can know to be ready when we get back and be ready to metaphorically gut him like a fish for doing this. Shino blinked, but otherwise showed no sign of emotion. All right, that then. They hurried to the tower, and Tenten waved to the receptionist, who knew her from her many trips in to see Shizune, and let them pass. I was not aware you were here often, Shino admitted. I'm training with Shizune a lot, Tenten said, shrugging. I'm pretty common around the tower now, both for some healing from Tsunade, and training from Shizune. I see, Shino agreed. Tenten opened the door with a chakra string before they reached it, and ran inside. You'd better not be back here for more healing, brat, Tsunade huffed when they ran inside, not bothering to look up from her paperwork. I'm not, promise, Tenten said quickly. I sensed Lee's marker I stuck on him a while ago moving away from the village. I assume you haven't cleared him for missions yet. I haven't, Tsunade growled. Since I'm a bit stuck here, I assume you two want to go hunt him down and, I assume, by extension, crash Shikamaru's, fetch the Uchiha, mission. That would be a correct assumption, Shino agreed. Yeah, that'd be great. I'll write you down as sent backup, Tsunade agreed. Head out immediately. Tenten turned to Shino and offered her hand. I can get us straight to Neji, who's a bit behind where Lee's now presumably fighting someone to see if everyone else needs some help with Horaishin. Shino blinked, apparently momentarily confused, then nodded and accepted her hand. Tenten reached out to where she could sense the marker on Neji, and triggered Horaishin, bringing them to Neji's passed outside. While he passed out dramatically, Tenten commented, "Can you handle that other passed out probably dead guy?" "I will ensure he is dead," Shino confirmed. Tenten nodded and saluted before teleporting to Lee's side. Or rather, to Lee and Gaara's side, since apparently they were fighting together now. "So, who wants to guess who's the idiot here?" Tenten asked in a cheery tone. "The one who forgot that our Hokage is a very powerful medic who will not appreciate you trying to do stupid things to get yourself injured further, or the idiot who thought sand was going to fix everything." Bracken dance rang out across the clearing, and Tenten chucked a kunai at it, and then off to the side, grabbing Gaara and Lee's shoulders as soon as the bones started exploding out of the ground and teleporting off to the side. "I apologize, but I needed to assist Naruto," Lee said, not really apologizing. "You'll be apologizing more when Tsunade gets through with you," Tenten informed him venomously. "You and the rest of the idiots who forgot that I have been training my butt off more so than any of you and was one of 3 people to make Chunin, the other of which was also left behind because Shikamaru is apparently a moron." Gaara looked almost surprised at her outburst, and was even more so when a bone spike exploded out of the ground in front of them, and before Tenten could throw another kunai to get them away, Kimimaro attempted to straight up kill Gaara, only to stop right before he stabbed into the Jinchuriki's head. He slumped over a minute later, and Tenten pressed her fingers against his neck. "He's dead," she reported. "Now, we'd better go collect the rest of the idiots." "Ah, yes," Lee agreed, looking contrite. Tenten summoned the pair of crutches she perpetually carried around in a scroll in case Lee pulled something like this, which he did often, and handed them to him. "You will be using these while we head back or Tsunade will have your head." Lee nodded meekly and accepted the crutches, leaning on them gratefully. Tenten smiled viciously at Gaara. "Now, do you have somewhere to be or are you coming back with us?" "Back with you," Gaara said, slightly too quickly, staring at her. "Wonderful," she spat. "Let's go. I have one more idiot teammate to pick up, 2 more idiot genin, and 1 more stupid chunin I will be beating up the second he is conscious enough for me to actually beat the tar out of him." She started striding back towards Konoha, uncaring of whether Gaara and Lee were following her. They reached where Kiba was sitting, leaning against a tree, while Kankuro stared at his puppet, sitting in the middle of the clearing with blood pooling around it. "Hello idiots," Tenten greeted, cheerful with zero patience for further BS. "We're going back to Konoha. You're welcome to join us on our search for the other dinguses." Neji, Choji, and Shikamaru stopped to battle the other sound 4 before here, Kiba groaned, cradling something small, white, and also covered in blood. "Akamaru," Tenten assumed. "I gathered as much," Tenten agreed. "Gaara, I would suggest making some stretchers, it doesn't look like Kiba will be going much of anywhere." Kankuro stood up and recalled his puppets. "I'm going to need to clean that one out." He wrinkled his nose at the one covered in blood. Tenten tossed him an empty storage scroll. "Seal them up and let's go." Neji was closest, and Tenten easily led them to where her idiot teammate was still passed out with Shino walking around and inspecting the area. He nodded politely to her, and she nodded back. Gaara made another stretcher of sand and Tenten picked up her teammate easily and dumped him onto it. Choji was similarly passed out, and was also placed onto a stretcher. Shikamaru and Tamari were last, and neither was passed out, or even all that hurt. "Hello absolute dingus," Tenten greeted cheerfully, smiling in the way that her teammates had learned meant, run and maybe find something to appease her because she is going to use you as target practice. She casually ignored everyone around her, carefully backing away, and Temari's feral grin. Would you, perhaps, like to explain why I, one of the 3 people that made Chunin this most recent Chunin exams, and Shino, the other person who did that, weren't included on this particular mission? Or even warned so we could be applied as backup? Shikamaru looked like he hadn't realized how much danger he was in. You just didn't seem useful. He yawned. Troublesome. Tenten's face went carefully blank with how hard she was trying not to murder him. Well, I suppose that I can see where this might have gone wrong. I see that you have been rescued by Temari, who you might just remember, beat in the preliminaries. And you brought along my teammate, who I also beat in the Chunin exams. You're a mostly long-range fighter, Shikamaru pointed out. With few other skills. I needed close-range fighters. Perhaps you didn't hear, Tenten remarked, pulling out one of the poison kunai. I've been training with multiple people on a variety of arts, including such wonderful things I could use to murder you, such as poison, seals, genjutsu, and further training in close combat weapons. When you can hit a fly at 30 meters while fighting Lee, you can inform me I am a long-range fighter with few other skills. Plus I can teleport. You didn't even think that I could save someone's life by being ready to be used as fast backup. You could have killed someone by not thinking of using backup. My teammates could have died and we could have lost Kiba and Choji if I didn't get in here to collect all of you. Shikamaru seemed to realize a slight portion of the danger he was in, and paled slightly at the sight of the kunai. Now, give me one good excuse why I shouldn't impale you with this and leave you to Tsunade's tender mercies. Cause we need him to do the report, Temari pointed out logically. He is the technical leader for this operation. You make a valid point, Tenten agreed, not actually really caring about that. Oh well, I was looking forward to making a very good point about how much of a dingus he is. I'll live with beating his backend later. I'll be there to see it, Temari promised, grinning. Tenten smiled somewhat forcedly at her. Wonderful. Now we need to get back to Konoha. Some of these dingus need medical attention. When she woke up, significantly calmer, and probably able to actually see Shikamaru without attempting to murder him, she made herself breakfast, then got ready to head to Genma's for poison lessons. Someone knocked on the door just as she was about to leave, and when she opened it, she found Lee, bent in half and holding out an offering of chocolate. Tenten blinked, bemused, but took them anyway. I apologize for being unyouthful and not speaking up when Shikamaru didn't think to consider bringing you. Lee shouted, a bit loud for right outside her apartment. And for going out when Tsunade had not cleared me to fight yet. I am very sorry, Tenten chuckled and patted his shoulder. It's all right, Lee, as long as everyone's all right. They are, Lee was quick to reassure her. Even Naruto is all right, although he will be in the hospital for a while. That's good to hear, Tenten agreed. I have a place to be, but thank you for the chocolates. Of course, it was the least I could do for all the trouble I caused. Well, you're the one that alerted me you idiots would need help, so it's forgiven, Tenten told him firmly. Now please move, I have a place to be. One she didn't feel like harassing to. Lee moved aside, then turned and speed walked away, and Tenten followed at a more sedate pace because that was the way to the stairs. Which she needed to get down. Because she was a polite ninja, not one that just indiscriminately went out windows like some sort of heathen. On the break she had after poisons and before sealing, while Jiraiya couldn't be bothered to show up because he was busy being a pervert, she dropped by the Yamanaka flower shop to grab some flowers for those still stuck in the hospital. Ino was actually manning the counter when she got the flowers, and thus Tenten was dragged into some idle chatter while Ino rang up the flowers and tied them with cute ribbons. So, you apparently did something, because Shikamaru's been almost panicked about something, Ino commented like it was offhanded. Tenten knew full well it was far from offhanded. I threatened him a bit and called him a dingus, Tenten admitted. And gave him a bit of a lecture. Ah, that'll do it, Ino agreed, nodding. I saw one of the papers he was frantically scribbling on. He's trying to find a suitable apology gift for you. Or at least I assume that's what the list was for. Lee dropped by my apartment earlier with chocolates and an apology, Tenten said, tapping the hip pouch that still held the chocolates, since she hadn't managed to eat them yet. She would later though. I'd expect an apology from the rest of the boys then, Ino said, smiling. Congratulations, you managed to probably get the attention of several clan heads. Tenten made a face. Should I be glad or should I be dreading that? Glad maybe, Ino suggested, shrugging. I heard Dad talking with Shikaku and Shuza last night about something, and heard your name mentioned, so who knows really. That's not reassuring in the slightest, Tenten groaned. Well, I need to hurry if I'm going to drop these all off then get back for some more training. Good luck, Ino called after her. Luckily the hospital wasn't too far away, and she had a Hiraishin marker there anyway just in case. I'm here to see whoever of the retrieval of Uchiha Sasuke mission is still in the hospital, Tenten informed the lady at the front politely. Ah, nice of you to be here, Nintemi, one of the nurses, came out of one of the hallways. They know you better, maybe you can intimidate them better than I can. I'll get them back in bed, Tenten sighed, well used to doing this with Lee. Repeatedly. Sometimes Neji too. Naruto's room was first, and he was jumpy and incredibly on edge, nearly jumping onto the ceiling when they came in. You have got to settle down, Tenten told him sternly, approaching his bedside and putting his flowers in the vase with the others. Nintemi's not mean, I'm only mean to idiot ninja who don't stay in bed, Nintemi agreed, smiling with too many teeth. Naruto seemed to settle down slightly at that, although still flinched at odd sounds. Tenten assumed he had some trauma with the hospital. Tenten was about to leave, when Naruto straightened abruptly, making Nintemi glare at him. Oh, I was gonna say, Naruto said quickly, relaxing under Nintemi's glare for stressing his body. I'm sorry too for not making Shika bring you along too. I doubt you had a say in the choosing of the team, but I thank you for the apology. Tenten agreed, smiling. Rest up and heal Naruto. He brightened and nodded, and Tenten left, following Nintemi to the next room. Choji, it appeared, he didn't seem to be trying to get out of bed, although he was still very thin. It looked unhealthy on him. Akamichi were supposed to be round, the lack of fat and muscle looked weird. Hey Tenten, Choji greeted her, waving tiredly. Did you bring food? I didn't, sorry, Tenten apologized, setting his flowers on the bedside table. I only brought flowers. We'll get you some food in here in a second, Nintemi reassured him. Feel better soon, Tenten told him, leaving for the next room. She had to be quick, she was running out of time. Although she did have a Hiraishin marker where they'd be, so she had more time than a normal person. The next room was Kiba's. He was still in the bed, with Akamaru sleeping between his legs. He blinked and looked up when she entered. Oh, hey Tenten, hello to you too Kiba, she greeted, laying the flowers on his bedside table. Are you doing well? They say I can be discharged later today, Kiba said proudly. Akamaru'll need more rest before we can get back to active duty though. Well, heal fast, I have to get moving since I'm on a bit of a time crunch. Good luck, Kiba called after her. Tenten waved and followed Nintemi to the next room. Neji, who was out of bed and staring mutinously out the window. Hello, Tenten said cheerfully. Any news on when you'll be discharged to Guy's merciful hands? He turned to glare at her. She smiled innocently at him. She placed the flowers on the bedside table. You'd better be authorized to get out of bed, she added, glancing at Nintemi who didn't seem to be particularly annoyed at him. It's fine, Neji grunted. Your teammate is mostly done, just one more chakra healing session and he'll be discharged, Nintemi added. Good for him, Tenten said, giving a more real smile. Neji was apparently feeling antisocial, because he just gave another grunt. Since you're being antisocial, I'll leave, Tenten sniped. Good luck with your last healing session. Since Neji wasn't prone to replying to much, and Tenten was out of time, she nodded to Nintemi, and reached out and grabbed the Hiraishin seal to where she needed to be. More training, here she comes. Tenten was there for Naruto and Jiraiya setting out, uncaring of how early it was for everyone who wasn't trained by Guy for a year and a half, and still regularly went to morning practice when she had the time. When she did manage to corner Naruto away from Jiraiya to give him her gifts she'd been designing in her spare time. I asked Shizune, and here's a poison that'll keep him in bed and able to give you advice for a week, Tenten said, quietly, so as not to let Jiraiya know she was giving it to Naruto to use. Send a letter if you want another dose, but that vial has 3 doses in it. The spoon attached to it is its measuring thing. A bit more won't kill him but he'll be sicker, and a bit less will make it wear off faster. What's it for? Naruto asked, guileless face apparently unknowing of what his now mentor liked getting up to. In case you need him to stick around and give you advice instead of sneaking off to be a pervert, Tenten replied, smiling wryly. He's not a hands-on kind of teacher. If you want a book from the Konoha library you can send a letter to and I'll get one of the crows to send it, they're better for carrying delicate things. Thanks, Naruto said, more of a question than a statement. Tenten just patted him on the shoulder and figured he'd get it eventually. He'd figure it out. You have fun. Good luck. He'd need it. With that out of the way, she went back over to stand near the gate to let them leave. You'd better teach the kid something, was all she said to Jiraiya as he left. He had enough of an ego he could survive without her thanking him. Sure kid, sure. Tenten just scoffed as she waved to Naruto. Since Kakashi had finally started paying some attention to Sakura after Tenten threatened him into it with telling Guy where he was any time he was looking for him, Hyuga was in Anbu and had other stuff to do, and she was mostly done learning from Shizune, Tenten was left with more free time than she knew what to do with after her hectic schedule from right after the exams. She took missions with Team Guy, trained with them more often, and thoroughly enjoyed kicking Neji's butt every time they were left to spar without any other instructions. Tenten was always nice enough not to use poisons. Lucky him. Once particularly boring afternoon, Tenten remembered the scroll that had been with the summoning contract, and pulled it out again, reading it over. She did have to wonder what Itachi had meant by recent. Did he not want it looked into until it was 20 to 30 years after the event, or was almost a decade enough time? Either way, she was curious enough to go looking for more information. Genma was out on a quick assassination, so he'd be gone for a few days. She'd already asked Kakashi, who hadn't wanted to say anything, so she had to figure out something else. Well, the Uchiha had been the ones massacred, right? And with Sasuke gone to who knows where, and minimal security actually on the compound because no one really wanted to mess with it, she could probably sneak in and see if they had anything that could give her more information. Most entrances were defended by at least one Anbu and a Chunin to shoo people away. The Anbu made it harder, so Tenten didn't do anything for a while. Then she realized that the crows had been the summons of Itachi and Shisui Uchiha. Maybe they knew a back way in. Crows were very smart and had good memories, so it was definitely possible. The crows were able to show her a back way in, and then further led her to an underground area full of scrolls. Scrolls that would hopefully give her a better idea of what she was working with. She had to stop after the third one and sit back to contain her nausea. She could handle a lot, but some of the plans here were beyond even her strong stomach. They were talking about massacring most of Konoha. For what? A temporary respect? Fear? Did they want their own clan to be slaughtered? They couldn't fight against Konoha forever. She managed to swallow back her bile to go back to reading. It recorded Itachi infiltrating Anbu to get information and be in the Hokage's good graces, Shisui growing increasingly stressed as more and more pressure was put on him as the friendliest and most open and obviously kind of the Uchiha. All of it was recorded for history to see. Tenten had to seal away every other scroll she found, unable to continue reading now. Maybe later when she inevitably woke up in the middle of the night from nightmares she still had regularly. She was, of course, up in the middle of the night, as happened a lot. At least now she had enough free time to actually just get 4 hours of sleep at a time. Even if not all at night or even remotely in a row. She's getting enough sleep, she swears. The one she was reading now was an investigation towards Shisui's death. His body was never found apparently, and despite the suicide note, Itachi was apparently a prime suspect. Couldn't they just leave well enough alone and let Itachi mourn his friend? She would say it was sick, but she already knew that from the plans. The crow currently in her room apparently sensed her distress from it and came over to demand cuddles. She was plenty happy to put the scroll down and oblige. She was mostly out of other options, so she supposed it was time to ask Itachi. Tenten wrote a letter for the crows to take, slowly and over several days while she stressed about the fact that she was, in fact, contacting a known murderer and village missing ninja. Genma seemed almost concerned about her probably obvious stress, although of course, Lee and Neji didn't notice a thing. She loved her boys, but they wouldn't notice a bug if it flew in front of their faces. A thing she'd seen happen several times. You'd think they'd have better spatial awareness, they were ninja after all. And Neji was a Hyuga. Either way, her dumb boys. Once the letter was off and the entire matter was out of her hands, she relaxed slightly. The ball was in Itachi's court for now. Nothing she could do, since she was a Chunin, and expected to reach Junin within a year or two, maybe less. She had more access to missions like sorting through old files to see which ones could be thrown away, or which ones needed to be written down somewhere else. It was pretty rare someone actually wanted to do those tasks, so once she offered to do it once, most of the missions were funneled toward her. She didn't mind. Most of the mission reports were absolutely hilarious, and the ones she wasn't allowed by clearance to read had already all been weeded out before the files got locked away in the storage room. Plus the pay was good, so that was definitely a bonus. And it kept her busy enough to keep her mind off the letter that had definitely reached Itachi by now. While going through another box, this one of A-rank missions, mostly some assassinations and the occasional hilarious-sounding destruction mission, she found a dark file. Anbu. The fact that it wasn't in with the other Anbu files in another room was suspicious all on its own. It should have been weeded out. The system to check these before they went in was meticulous. She, despite maybe her better judgment, opened the file and sat down to read it. The first sentence, the mission summary, already had her blood running cold. Itachi Uchiha and Shisui Uchiha, assigned to spy on the Uchiha clan and report back with any plans and possible strategies to counter them or stop the massacre. Tenten quickly sealed the file away into the seal that also held the note from Itachi. Later. She'd have to read that later. She finished that box, having sorted them mostly into the trash pile, since all missions were recorded also in the big mission books that kept track of all the missions and who did them. The files were really just the mission reports of who did the missions, which rarely were actually needed. So into the trash they went, to be recycled into new paper. And since they were getting recycled anyway, then well, no one cared if Tenten took some of the funnier reports to read again later. She was starting to amass a collection for when she needed a pick-me-up. Or entertainment when she was stuck in bed for whatever reason, be it that Kakashi had accidentally almost impaled her while they sparred again, or trying to build up a poison immunity with Genma put her out of commission and stuck in bed recovering for a few days. Or she accidentally used too much chakra and was stuck in bed for a day by Tsunade who refused to let her pull a Kakashi and work through chakra exhaustion. Since Tenten had the soul Konoha brain cell, she listened to Tsunade because she was a doctor and not just because she was the Hokage. Once the box was done and stacked with the other finished ones, a crow puffed into being by her feet. A letter was held securely in its beak. Tenten swallowed hard, resisting the urge to Hiraishin as far away as she could get. Which was really just across the village since she didn't really have many markers out of the village. The crow waited patiently for her to take the letter. She took it, noting the elegant script her name on the front was written in. Itachi had been the Uchiha heir, it made sense he had good handwriting. She was stalling. She pulled out a senbon to carefully open the letter. Like a makeshift letter opener, a trick she'd seen Genma use a few times. Tenten, I cannot express how happy I am that Shisui's Tanto and harness have passed to someone who will put them to good use. He enjoyed ridiculous tricks with weapons and perhaps knew too many for comfort. I'm afraid that this is not a fun story, and while I would rather not burden you with it, it's important that someone besides me knows about it. I will be in a village 4 days from Konoha, due east, for 2 weeks. If you cannot make it, send another letter and I will arrange another time and place. Thank you for caring enough to find out about this, but be careful, Konoha is not safe. Eyes hide in the shadows, and as the roots grow ever stronger the tree withers away. Itachi. Tenten tried to decide whether she wanted to know what that was a metaphor for. Probably not, but she'd find out soon enough it seemed. There was actually a map hanging up on the wall of this room, although there was in most rooms, and Tenten checked what village Itachi was probably talking about. It wasn't one she'd been to before, but the name looked familiar. She checked the files she'd just gone over, and realized that there were 3 different demolition missions all in that same area. Plus she'd never been to that village. She did need more markers outside of the village, and she did kind of want to see the demolition sites, so the desk ninja would probably accept that if she asked for a mission in or around that village. Mind made up, she sealed away the letter, put the box back, and wandered up to the mission desk. It had been the last box in the chunk of the room she'd been doing for this mission, since the rooms were so dense they were high C rank 4-hour missions, so she went up both to collect her pay and for a mission. Hello Tenten, Ringo was on the desk today, Uruka next to her. How goes it? I finished. There were a lot of really funny demolition missions in the boxes. I got them sorted out from the assassination missions and got them sorted as to which ones can go and which ones are important. Niece, I'll see you tomorrow again then. Actually, I was hoping you had a mission around this area. Tenten pointed to the right village on the map. There were 3 demolition sites there and I've never seen one. Plus I've never been there. It's a wonderful little village, Uruka said, nodding. We should have something around there. Yeah, probably, Ringo agreed, shuffling through the papers. It's pretty far away though, maybe that's why you haven't been there. I had Guy as my Junin sensei, Tenten pointed out. I've been to farther places as a training trip. Also I figured I could leave Harishan markers in the villages along the way, since I don't have many outside of Konoha. That's a good idea, Uruka praised in his teacher voice. Will you try and take more missions outside of the village? Well, since my schedule is slowing down, maybe, Tenten agreed, smiling. She probably should start trying to take more missions out of the village. Other than the times she went on the occasional lower C rank with Team Guy. Here, a nice easy delivery mission for that village. A good mission for your first solo one, unless you want some teammates. I'm sure I can survive doing that by myself. And it's probably better I do my first few solo missions while I'm still a Chunin. Always good to get used to stuff now while the world isn't out to kill you. Ringo chirped, offering the scroll. You can pick up the thing tomorrow and then leave. I wouldn't start tonight, it's pretty late already. Tenten looked out the window at the sunset-streaked sky. Huh, it is. Yeah, tomorrow then. Good luck, Uruka said, smiling kindly. Thanks for the mission, Tenten replied, tucking the scroll away and waving. She walked away like a normal person because she wasn't a heathen that went out windows. Genma clapped her on the back and told her good luck when she informed him. Shizune made her double-check her poisons and antidotes, and Kakashi probably didn't even hear her. Since that was taken care of, Tenten made dinner with the remnants in her fridge, left enough to make a breakfast, and went to sleep. Morning brought breakfast and picking up the delivery, which was a set of decorative weapons that weren't actually usable in battle. They were pretty anyway, so Tenten admired them for a bit before sealing them up. A goodbye to the weaponsmith, and Tenten was on her way. While she did have to run the entire way, it wasn't too strenuous since she had sealed all her supplies up and also she trained with Guy. A little run at a relatively sedate pace wasn't going to kill her. Not like loops around the village at top speed, which would knock anyone out. The village was small, so Tenten left a marker at the edges just in case, and headed in. The delivery was dropped off, and Tenten was left to look for Itachi. Itachi was pretty inconspicuous, but the 7-foot blue shark man was not, so she found them pretty easily in a dango shop. She summoned one of the crows to sit on her shoulder and slid off her headband, tying it around her waist and under her shirt. She didn't know how much the shark guy knew, or if he'd be friendly and not try to kill her if she was obviously associated with Konoha. She could get away, maybe hold him off for a bit with some poison, but she still felt safer without her headband on display. She approached them calmly, the crow preening its feathers on her shoulder. Itachi Uchiha, who's asking? The shark man grunted. Tenten, the current other holder of the crow contract. The crow on her shoulder cawed like it was trying to show off. Kisame, I'll meet up with you later. Leave us be. The shark man, Kisame apparently, grunted, but got up and left, his massive sword that Tenten now realized was the Samahata, the chakra probably sentient Kiri sword. That was awesome. Tenten tentatively took the seat Kisame left behind, the crow hopping off her shoulder to pester Itachi for treats. He moved the dango so it couldn't get it, then offered the crow a bit of dried fruit from inside his cloak. I found the mission for you and Shisui for the spying on the Uchiha clan. It was tucked into a box of A-rank demolition missions, Tenten said, trying to prompt the conversation into starting. She didn't have all day. Itachi scoffed lightly. Sloppy work. He paused, looking almost hesitant. Did you bring it with you? Tenten, who always had it on her with the seal because she didn't trust it to lay around somewhere, even in her own house, pulled it out of her shirt in response. Itachi took it gently, opening it and sliding one of Shisui's reports free. He has awful handwriting, Tenten said, gesturing to Shisui's report. Did he ever do any handwriting practice? Itachi didn't seem to have any real outward reaction, although it was really just from working with Neji at all times of the day that let her catch the almost sad look he gave the paper. He had better handwriting when he was trying. He was just so tired of the mission that he turned in reports with increasingly bad handwriting as a subtle protest. He thought it was hilarious. Itachi's head bowed, and he placed the paper back in the folder. He was so bright and then he was gone. Blown out like a candle in wind. Of all the things she had expected today, having to restrain herself from trying to comfort a missing ninja who'd famously killed his own family and was definitely S-class, wasn't one of them. She did suppose that he'd had to leave so soon after Shisui died, so he probably didn't have much time to mourn. He straightened after a moment, a blank slate once again. He pushed the folder to her, and she took it, sealing it away again. What do you want to know? Everything. In the end they had settled on writing down all of the important information in a series of letters aimed at no one for Tenten to say the crows brought her. She would bring them to Shizune, who would hopefully help her bring them to Tsunade without getting tossed to T&I. When she did enter Shizune's office it was to find her kissing Genma. Or rather, making out with him. Tenten turned her gaze to literally anywhere but them, resisting the urge to turn around. She shuffled her feet, hoping they'd stop and notice her, but it didn't seem to be in the cards. Tenten coughed lightly, drawing their attention. They both jumped, having apparently been so wrapped up in each other that they hadn't noticed her at all. Tenten, Shizune said, coughing a couple of times and trying to straighten her hair and clothes. What brings you here? Well, the crows brought me some very concerning things after I got back and turned in the mission report. She held out the seal Itachi had oh so carefully drawn. A basic storage seal, copied from one he actually had on him. It wouldn't be traced back to Tenten. Letters. From the other holder of the contract. Genma and Shizune paled slightly, but Genma reached forward to take the seal anyway. What are they about? The Uchiha massacre. Genma frowned slightly, but opened the seal, picking one of the letters at random. It was one of the ones detailing Danzo. Why would he oh, he'd started reading it. Shizune peeked over his shoulder. Oh indeed, I'll bring this to Lady Tsunade. She'll have to hear about it. I knew Minato didn't like Danzo, Genma muttered, but this. Tenten didn't even have to try to look sad and angry that an elder of the village would do this. She was anyway. He wasn't helping the village anymore, this was killing it. Come on, we need to get these to Lady Tsunade, Shizune said, gently pulling the letter from Genma's hands. She'll bring him to justice. She may want to gather the clan heads, so he can't escape, Tenten advised. Make the suggestion to her yourself, Shizune advised. Come, Tenten followed, breathing a silent sigh of relief. This was out of her hands now. Now the Hokage would handle it,